Hear words of faith in Psalm 139. O God, you have searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from far away. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, O God, you know it completely. You hem me in, behind and before, shielding me with your hand. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is so high that my mind cannot reach. You created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. For all these mysteries I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my body even there. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed. How precious are your thoughts to me, O God! How impossible to number them! I try to count them. They are more than the sand. I come to the end. I am still with you. For ancient songs of trust, we give thanks to God.
Listen for words of faith in the Hebrew Scriptures from the first chapter of Genesis. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So humankind was created in God's image. In the divine image, God created them. Male and female, God created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth." For the word that was in the beginning, for the word made known in Mother Earth, for the challenging search to understand our place on this planet, we give thanks.
Good morning. This morning, Trinity and I are going to have a conversation about the theme for Season of Creation at this stage in the cycle, which is about humanity. And our particular perspective is, as with people with a disability, we want to talk about the contribution and some of the new understandings of humanity and also creation, which comes from that experience. We're trying to do it fairly much like a conversation, which in my case means I'm going to forget to say important things and probably tell you one or two bits of trivia. Such as, for example, can anyone answer the question, what does the season of creation and Vegemite have in common? Now, don't overthink it. It's not really a trick question.
I've heard yeast and salt.
Yes, I'm thinking of something else. Sorry? No, not that either. It's much more mundane. They're both Australian inventions. The season of creation, you may not know, was developed in Adelaide by the Lutheran biblical scholar Norman Harble. And Norman developed the proposal a bit over 30 years ago. And as liturgy evolves in the church, in a very, very short space of time, large numbers of Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant and ecumenical faith organisations now follow the season of creation. So I thought that was something of interest. Probably in church history, I think that and the sainting of Mary MacKillop are probably Australia's two claims to fame in international church matters. Like the Revised Common Lectionary, which we follow here at Pitt Street, the season of creation also works on a 3-year cycle. Because how Norman set it up was so that there would be different themes throughout the 3 years. So mountains, water, sky, etc. And so amongst the themes, humanity gets a mention, one mention in what's essentially a 12 to 14 week cycle. And so we're reflecting on humanity this morning. Trinity, you're the president of an organisation called People with Disability Australia.
Yep, that's right.
Is a national body. Can you tell us something about PWDA and what the organisation believes in, is trying to achieve, and also perhaps a little bit about what's sort of motivating or driving you as a person of faith to be involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start off by clarifying I'm speaking as Trin here and not as my organisation. And I'll get into a little bit why I especially try to keep faith separate from the disability space. But as far as my goals personally when doing disability advocacy, and as with the rest of the disability rights and advocacy space, we're after widespread social change that brings about the full inclusion of people with disability and the full realization of all of our rights. So often that's summed up by some concepts like the 1980s phrase, "nothing about us without us," that came as the radical American disabled people were dragging themselves up the stairs of Congress and such, fighting for the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as like the human rights concept of dignity, that every human body is fundamentally worth something. And when I'm more in my personal life thinking about myself as a person of faith, I'm often still doing the same sorts of things in a space like this. I just use slightly different language, or I've got more flexible language. I might understand, as well as the phrases that I've just said, that overlaps with "we're all children of God," or that disability is part of the full spectrum of human experience, being kind of correlated with that phrase, that we're all made in God's image. And yeah, for me, there's a utility in keeping faith-based language away from the disability space, at least when I'm in a position of power in that space, because of how extensive the experience of religious trauma and harm has been for disabled people. There's a lot of our scriptures and the way that we do commentary around religion is very, it draws a lot on the charitable model of disability and the medical model, which finds fault more in the individual's broken, deviant body than with the society. So often we're moving to the social model of disability and this sort of space. So,
Trinity, can I interrupt you there? Because just when you're talking about trauma and abuse, they're extraordinarily have profound impacts on people. Are you saying that churches should get out of disability care services, or shouldn't get involved in the first place?
Not necessarily. I think nothing about us without us means giving disabled people of faith a space in the design of services, so disability services, ensuring that there's disabled people running, say, religious service provider, ensuring that we can bring disability expertise into those spaces is really important. And this aligns a lot with what particularly this congregation and a bunch of others are doing on the reckoning for institutional child sexual abuse. Overlaps a lot with disability. Like, my organization works with disabled people who are victims of institutional sexual abuse from being abused in these sorts of institutions that used to be run by churches, as well as how that's turned into modern group homes. So there's a real reckoning to be happened, and I know that a congregation like this and others are up to that kind of task. But yeah. I think that pretty much covers off everything I was thinking, but I suppose while I'm using different language, that's a kind of postmodernist way of thinking about myself. But it's important to me that the work I'm doing politically and spiritually is materially aligned, that all the different ways of thinking about changing the world get us to the same sort of place, which is the full empowerment of people, the rebuilding of structures. Yeah.
Thanks, Trinity.
So having laid some foundational thoughts about how we kind of create and redesign some of these structures, that takes us to our Genesis 1 reading. Warren and I both found that a challenging one, in particularly how it assigns humans the responsibility for having dominion. Did you want to speak a bit that direction?
Yes, definitely, and it is difficult for me because I actually love Genesis chapter 1, or at least most of it. To me, it's one of the beautiful examples of Jewish mythology and poetry, and just the ordered pattern of the 7 days and the way in which the poetry unfolds, I find very powerful. But when we get down to the creation of humans, there is some material which is liberating. The fact that the text spells out God created male and female, and women and men are created in the image of God, has been very empowering for women in church and society. But we do run into the little problem of a Hebrew word called rada, translated as dominion, or to dominate. And sometimes, in the interest of promoting good causes, scholars of one sort or another try to uncover the real meaning of the Hebrew word. But this is, and a lot of feminist and queer and some disability theologians have been doing that. But in this case, in the case of Genesis 1:26, it just doesn't work. Just doesn't work. The word rada, it does mean dominate, it means control, it means rule, it means subdue. There's no sugarcoating this particular text in Scripture. And sometimes in hearing and responding to the text, we just have to say that understanding is not one that we can share in terms of our understanding of faith. But one of the constructive things we can do, though, is listen to other parts of Scripture, because on a whole lot of matters, the books that comprise the Scriptures don't speak with a single voice. There are many voices. In Job, for example, we have the wonderful text in chapter 12, in which Job is instructed to listen to the animals, and they will teach you. Listen to the animals. That's a lot different to dominate, subdue, control, and rule. And Trinity, I happen to know that one of your favourite scripture passages is Psalm 139,
Yeah.
which we heard. So
Yeah.
would you mind telling us why that's one of your favourite passages?
Yeah, absolutely. So this psalm for me is about how closely we locate ourselves to the process of creation. Like in that psalm that Jared read out loud, God is really close by in it. God and the birth mother both collaborate in knitting together new life. Each path and choice that we make along the life course is proximate to the divine. And a lot of the choices that we make here are kind of value neutral. The psalm isn't really about determining, okay, like which action is a mitzvah and which is a sin. It's just like, it's near God, God knows it. So there's some comfort in that for somebody very anxious like me. And the confronting thing about that psalm is the very next line that we didn't then turn to. It begins, "If only you, God, would slay the wicked." It's a really sudden right turn, and I go, oh. I've puzzled over that for a long while, and it came to me just this week that that's the point in the psalm where God suddenly becomes distant. The human is just left by themselves, sort of like full of wrath and vengeance and hating their enemies and going, oh, well, God, why won't you smite them down? Where are you? Because that's a human need to destroy. That's not divine. That takes us away from the divine. We're with God when we partake in creation, whatever that looks like. And I think that that's another way that we can push back on that challenging dominion word in Genesis, that it is, in my view, some recognition of reality that because we as humans do have the power to dominate, there's kind of no opting out of it to an extent. You can't be the boss who's like, oh, don't worry, I'm a friend boss, and then suddenly your colleague does something wrong and then you need to bring down the hammer, right? That's not really how we think about power structures. So if we have been charged because of our knowledge and our ability to choose with dominion to some extent, then how do we do that right? If we create, then we're with God, and if we use that power to destroy, then God is not with us. That's kind of something that I've come to. I suppose it's a yes and rather than a disagreeing with you, but...
I think I'll stick with my disagree, because I think particularly in the last 250 years
Yeah.
with the rise of industrial capitalism, the price of human domination has increased exponentially.
Yeah.
And whereas you might sort of mount an argument, well, for the few thousand years beforehand, wasn't too bad. I mean, the planet was okay. But the argument to me, with the extraordinary impact of climate change, is the price of human dominion has now, the equation has changed.
Absolutely. And this might just be my sort of socialist tendencies talking, but perhaps I want to take that dominion that we have and use it to fix what we've stuffed up. I don't know. The other thing about this psalm that I absolutely adore is reading it as somebody with a non-normative body. Again, I was talking about this psalm lacks value judgments a lot of the time. But the one that we get is that the fact that we've been created with the divine is what makes us wonderful. So my wonderfulness isn't measured by how much my disabled body systems and blood tests come close enough to some, medicine statistical benchmark of what's normal, or whether the doctors can get me closer to it if they start poking and prodding. It kind of akin to how close can they get me back to Adam in Genesis, or my sacredness isn't measured by how close my body comes to Eve's, and in turn how hers is or isn't a replica or a flawed version of Adam's. We don't need to engage in those sort of like interesting but disturbing conversations to an extent. There's some beautiful scholarship around there that we don't have time to go anywhere near. But I love that this psalm, because it just grounds it somewhere really simple, that however I am has been made by and with God. How I've been changed has been by and with God, and that makes me divine, as with all of us. So I mean, that's one of the ways that humans have grappled with disability in Scripture. And Warren, did you want to talk us through a little bit more about disability theology and some other ways that people have drawn this out?
I'll just mention a couple of things. There's certainly been, we're all quite familiar with what I call adjectival theology, where theology comes with a word before it. It's feminist theology or liberation theology or queer theology, etc. And there are good points for that, and as well as some reservations about overdoing it. But just in the last 30 years, there's been an extraordinary growth in disability theology. The landmark text was written by a disabled woman in the US by the name of Nancy Iseland, who was a professor of theology at Vanderbilt. And her book was published in 1994. And since then, almost going back to my point about season of creation, the growth of theologies being written and developed by and for people with disability has grown right across Catholicism, evangelical circles, Orthodox churches, and Protestants. And I think there are two themes, regardless of which ecclesial context the theology's been developed. One is the diversity of humankind, and including, but not limited to, people with disability, and how that extends to diversity within ecosystems, fundamental biodiversity. So disability theology is one part of a move to link the commonness of humanity with other forms of life. And the other key theme in disability theology is interdependence, that all humans are interdependent, and the ways in which able-bodied and disabled people with disability, and all of the variations that fairly simplistic category suggests, are actually interdependent, and also we have an interdependence with the planet. But I'm now conscious of time, Trinity. I thought our conversation could go on and on, but I might ask you to sort of bring it together with some of the themes and then lead us into the next part of our liturgy.
Yeah, I might do those at the same time. Kathy has arranged really beautifully this kind of touching practice for us each to gather around or process down the center of the church and pick up one of these stones and then lay it on the altar and then return to your seat, as I'm assuming we're singing the next piece. So as you pick up a stone and the stone that you carry, I might encourage you to take the luck of the draw or something like that, as creation sometimes can be, and then appreciate a little bit about what your stone looks like. The way that it is just the way that it is. It's the combination of how it's been forged in the fires of the earth and, knitted together in that depth, and then the totality of every path it's taken since, every other harder rock it's come up against and cracked against, or how it's been able to scrape along others, been worn down by waves and sand or whatever that rock went through to then get to here. And there's some fear in that, perhaps, that we also bear the same sorts of scars and that we don't have that control over our own lives. But there's also something strong enough that with an encounter like that, we can reshape ourselves as well. So, yeah.
Thanks very much.